We shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Through the unknown remembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning.
Robbie, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, Caleb, it's my pleasure.
So could you just talk about for a second, like what you do, your art, everything with animal math?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Animal Math is a short film that I worked on over the course of, I think it ends up being about 7 years. I started it towards the end of my life as a touring musician. And I used to make the music videos for my band. I was in a band called Deadza when I lived in Nashville, which was there for like 9 years. So like, pretty much all of my 20s. And I started playing around with cutout animation and just filming stuff on an iPhone and making music videos. And I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and started having some real issues touring and it's not really conducive to a musician's lifestyle. You kind of want to stay at home. And I was enjoying making the animation so much, and they were proving to be kind of popular. So it was a hard decision, but it was kind of a clear decision to just keep focusing on that. And with cutouts, I learned to do it from watching Terry Gilliam from Monty Python. So of course the early ones are kind of similar to that. But then as the years went by, I really started seeing the potential to do something a little more subtle and sophisticated, hopefully. And I thought I could really, if I really pushed myself, I could make something rather than something with that kind of slapstick energy to it. You see, as much as I dearly love the Monty Python cartoons, I was pretty quickly, I was very keen to distance myself from that, and I want to make something really beautiful if I could. So that's kind of the origin of doing the cutout animation. And I've always drawn, since I was a little kid. I love drawing, and so I was really into film and everything. And so realizing that with this really simple technique, where I could just, I'm not really super skilled with computers either. So just I loved how straightforward it is that you can draw something, you can cut it out, you can put in a camera, and you can move it around, and it's really as simple as that. It's like I always call this as like like a very sophisticated kindergarten project because it's all. When I was a kid, I was always cutting out monsters and animals and things that I loved cutting out my drawings. So it's kind of weirdly been something I've done like my whole life. But also, being a musician and a songwriter, I I always really enjoyed that, and I found being in a band really gratifying. But it's hard. You got to rehearse the same songs over and over again, and everything has to go through this democratic process. And so, I just got really interested in film soundtracks and really fixated on how music pulls out kind of hidden qualities in imagery. And I really wanted to work on a film score by myself. So I used my same keyboard rig that I used during my years in Deadza. It's sitting over here. I got a Nord Electro 5, which is really good for vintage electromechanical keyboard sounds like Hammond organ and electric piano. And it's got do you know what a mellotron is?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So you can have like all the Mellotron tapes and stuff. And of course, you can do all that with a MIDI keyboard, but it's designed for performance. And it has really great, harpsichord and choir samples and things like that. And then a Moog Little Fatty, which is analog synthesizer.
Okay.
So I played the entire thing on both of those, and then had a couple friends add some guitar and drums in some spots. So it seems very long-winded, but like that's coming out of my life in the band and everything, and kind of music pulled me away from visual art for so long, and then it kind of pulled me back in when I realized I wanted to have cool t-shirts and album covers for the band. It made I don't feel like I really had a distinctive like visual style or
Hmm.
fingerprint until the band kind of pushed me to make something that was unique to the band. That was kind of my initial incentive to find my voice visually. And so as that fell apart, it seemed really clear to me that like, okay, well, I've spent all of this effort trying to make these music videos, and it's something it's strictly animation and music, and I just wanted to
Hmm.
take that one step further and do something longer, where before we had an existing song and I would take all the animation and try to fit it into the song, and this time I made everything together. So the music is composed specifically to correspond with each shot, and I love Disney's Fantasia as a kid. I still do, but it had a really huge impact on me as a kid. And so, there's no dialogue, no sound effects. I really just wanted to see how far I could take that with cutout animation.
Hmm.
And here I am 7 years later. Just premiered last week.
So what did that process look like of trying to sync up everything before you were finishing it? Were you like doing heavy storyboarding, or was it kind of just like based off of feel?
So it's weird. I know there's programs and things for professional composers where you can have the film and mark out
Mhm.
I don't write music, like I don't know how to write or read the
Yeah.
actual notations. So I had I spent about a year kind of revising my storyboard. So I had all the shots laid out, and then the only way that really made sense to me to do this, this might seem silly to anybody who does this kind of stuff professionally, but I put the storyboards up above my keyboards and I sat
Mhm.
there and I would have an idea of what kind of chord progression or what mood I was going for on the keyboards, and I would just follow along with my eyes and try to get an organic feel for how long each shot wanted to be.
Mhm.
So once I kind of settled into a tempo on the keyboards, it's so weird looking back because I don't even, I listened to the score, and I got to see the premiere at Fantastic Fest in Austin last week and watch it at the Alamo Draft House on a big
Mhm.
sound system and everything. And it's like, who did this? Like, I don't know. It's been a few years now since I did the score. So it's like, I don't really understand how I managed to get it to come together because I don't really know what I'm doing. But yeah, basically just kind of feel my way through one section at a time. I would say, okay, so I know it, this is kind of weird too, I guess, but I write the music out like in prose, like just descriptively.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll explain what kind of atmosphere I'm going for, what kind of I'll write what instruments I want to hear. So
Hmm.
it sounds ridiculous, but that's just kind of what makes sense to me. And I might write what key or something that it's in. So I'll just sit there, and once I settle on that, like so maybe I've got a good choir setting, and that's kind of
Hmm.
the vibe of the scene, and I'll work with the primary instrument for that scene and kind of flesh that out and record that, and then just build up layers, kind of improvising sometimes, and approaching it kind of like painting. Like you have your underpainting with the main chord progression, and then you just go and start building and subtracting sometimes, and
Hmm.
eventually, end up with hundreds of keyboard tracks. And I flew out to Nashville, as I had moved to Colorado at this point, and had a friend mix and master it for me and make it sound like it should.
That's actually really cool to hear, that your method there was, um, sorry, my train of thought just like completely died. Hold on 1 second. I looked at the wall and my brain
It
just like
happens
emptied
all the
out.
time. Well, it's very intuitive. It's like it's
Yeah.
very. I I don't have any education. I have a high school
Yeah.
education, so all of this stuff I'm just kind of approaching it blindly. I just try to find what feels right, and a lot of
Hmm.
times I don't think I could ever go back and look at the score and deconstruct
Hmm.
what the chords are or anything. I don't even know if I could play any of it. It just kind of, you just sit there and find the right shapes on the keys and it turns out. But it was really cool to hear it on a big sound system last week.
Yeah.
I am able to have a little more distance from the music than from the visuals for some reason, because the visuals you're staring at it for so long every day
Yeah.
of years. The music was relatively a quick process, and so
Mhm.
I'm able to kind of listen to it like somebody else did it or something.
That was my thought process. I remember it now. Yeah, I find it really interesting because I've actually kind of had that same feeling with the method that I use sometimes, like whenever I not really write music as much, but like whenever I'm writing, like say a screenplay or something like that, I have found myself doing a similar thing where how you said with your music, a lot of the time since you don't know how to actually rate sheet music or write notation or whatever, that you kind of just write out like the feeling that you want to convey and then some like basic instructions to kind of remind you of that feeling that you originally have. And I find that really interesting because I kind of also had the same feeling like that I was one of the like that I was the only person doing that because I also thought I was doing it wrong. Anytime that I like am trying to write out a story, it feels like ideas come so quick and then you just have to like instantly capture it however you can. And that was kind of the method that I always captured it and have always captured it, where it's like, okay, just try to write down words that will recapture the feeling in my head so that I can kind of instant replay it whenever I start to work.
If it works, it's valid. I would never denigrate like actually getting a proper education and how to do things properly, because obviously I admire and love a lot of artists who did go to film school or study
Mhm.
composition or whatever. And there's nothing against that, but I find that the people that are dearest to my heart in terms of other artists and musicians, they tend to be, and it's usually not even something I know up front, but I'll find out eventually, because I think it's something you can sense in the work. They almost
Mhm.
always tend to be people who are uneducated and just had this thing inside them, and it had to come out, and not knowing what they're doing wasn't a barrier to it. And in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, I think, not always, sometimes not knowing what you're doing, sometimes it can definitely be a hindrance, but
Yeah.
sometimes I worry, like if I had gone to art school or something. I know a lot of people who went to art school and they feel like their style was kind of stamped out of them. They learned to do
Mhm.
things correctly, and I think things sometimes take me a little longer, and I kind of got to find backwards ways to circumvent problems. But
Mhm.
I hope that whatever people who and whatever it is about my work that people who, are drawn to, those who are drawn to it. I think a lot of it really does come from that kind of, I don't know, kind of a place of, I don't know really what the word is, if it's naivety or innocence or what, like just not having a really intense um intellectual background behind it. I'm just kind of
Mhm.
fumbling my way forward and doing what compels me, and hopefully that stays kind of pure through the way I do things, because it's not, I do, I obviously, um, in the years since I left school, like I get really interested in certain types of music or certain
Mhm.
movements in film and animation and art, and I do educate myself. But I think when it's purely guided by your own curiosity and
Mhm.
impulses, it retains. I don't know. I think it allows your work to retain a fresh quality. Hopefully, I mean, who can
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, I mean, I've been having a sort of a thought feeling recently, very similar to that, and I've been reading this really great biography about Leonardo da Vinci, and I mean, he's created some of the best artworks, especially in his period and even up until now, and that was something that the author makes very clear throughout his biography is that Da Vinci, he didn't have like a traditional education in terms of like what most Renaissance painters of his time had, just because I mean his family wasn't poor, but he being the kind of illegitimate son of his father, he wasn't really entitled to the things that his father's later sons would have, and because of that, he kind of like developed this really cool way of looking at the world where he knew how to read, but he didn't get a lot of his knowledge from like the books he was reading. He kind of was getting it a lot from just experiences that he would have, and so his whole like scientific method was an artistic method was just having a thought and then seeing it through to the very end. And I've kind of, from that, I've started having this idea, like, I've always kind of felt like ideas are in some way their own kind of, not life form, but just like that they have their own kind of intelligence, and that
I
they find, and they kind of like find, people who something about the way that their life has gone makes them a good candidate to like bring this thing into existence.
I totally believe that. I don't think we. I think it's kind of arrogant when people it's like, oh, I came up with this, and it's like
Yeah.
you channeled it. I think
Hmm.
the only thing that really makes artists special, if they are at all, is the fact that they like notice the signal
Yeah.
enough to do something about it and bring it into the physical world. I think that the only thing you can really take credit for as an artist is just like being being dumb enough to sit down and actually take the what which other people would just be a passing whim, and
Yeah.
actually sit down and devote a lot of time and energy to it. So
Yeah.
I don't it's
Yeah, you have to be really
fun stuff.
really enchanted by the idea, I think, in a way
Yeah,
that most
yeah.
people aren't really willing to be. But then it's sort of like the uh the means or the ends prove the means to for artists, because no one who, I mean, a lot of people can have an idea simultaneously, but usually only one person is actually going to see that idea through to the point where it becomes like a
Right.
piece of art in whatever way. And then after that, that it sort of becomes self-evident. Like it speaks for itself and everybody understands. Like Star Wars. I mean, like Star Wars came about in a time when, and I mean that's such a cliche example, but it came about in a time when all sci-fi movies were like the kind of the popcorn fiction, Paul things, and then George Lucas comes around and creates this whole new vision that nobody would have believed in until he actually just showed them, hey, this is exactly what it looks like.
And in the 70s, I've actually been watching a lot of movies from the 70s recently, like Sorcerer and Chinatown and
Hmm.
McCabe Mrs. Miller, and all these movies, after the idealism of the 60s kind of crash and burn, there's a lot of nihilism and
Yeah.
and it made for some great art, but um and then Star Wars comes along in the late 70s, and it has a very fresh, optimistic,
Hmm.
naive quality to it, and it was kind of like a tonic for all of the dour
Hmm.
feelings that people were having. And yeah, it seems so obvious when you look at it now, but like him taking kind of cherry picking from all the different world religions and myths, and taking the samurai picture and the western and Buck Rogers, and just putting it all to this perfect little pop package. I think that's genius. One of the things that makes is like a hallmark of genius is you see something entirely new, and you're like, oh, it feels like it always existed, or like, how did
Yeah.
I think of that? It's just like so inevitable that it had to come into existence. That's
Yeah.
what it was for sure. Real quick, what's the name of that Da Vinci book? I feel like I may have read this.
It's actually just called Leonardo da Vinci. It's by Walter Isaacson.
That sounds. I can't remember the. I read a biography of him, of his life a few years ago, and I can't remember the name of it. It had like a pale blue cover,
Okay.
but it was, yeah, it's really fascinating. It's always good to take these people who kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, Mona Lisa, whatever. Like people think they know, like they become an icon, and it's good to go back and strip away and realize this is just a person, and
Yeah.
there's a lot more to him than the Mona Lisa. Like um, he had he was a really incredible human being. I need to see that Ken Burns documentary about him.
Actually, before we keep going, I can go grab it real quick to show you what it looks like. So this is the version I have. It just has his face really close up, and it's by Walter Isaacson.
Cool. I'll look into that. He's
Yeah. Walter Isaacson is a
definitely
great biographer. Like all of his,
other good ones you've read.
well, another one by him that has had a giant impact on my life was the one that he did on Steve Jobs.
Hmm.
That one is, I read that whenever I was pretty young, so I need to, I think, reread it. But I've noticed like throughout my life that a lot of the things that Steve Jobs really perfected throughout his life and that Walter Isaacson brought up in his biography, kind of just like became parts of like the way that I think about things. And I didn't really notice that until I started getting back into other people talking about Jobs' life. And I mean, even just things like how like on point he was with making sure that everything inside and out that he was creating or was helping create was just absolutely perfect. I kind of took that to I took that to heart, and I think everything that I create, like I'll sit at something like that could be like 3 minutes long, and I'll sit at it for hours just to make sure that everything is like microscopically exactly where I want it to
Mhm.
be. And
Yeah.
that was something that I really picked up from him. And he just lived a really interesting life. And Walter Isaacson it was actually really cool. And this was the book that kind of made Isaacson famous as a biographer because he wrote it, I mean, obviously not knowing, but he wrote it right around the time that Steve Jobs ended up dying from
Mhm.
pancreatic cancer. And so he had been interviewing Steve Jobs and everybody around him for like a year or two, or maybe even longer before the pancreatic cancer eventually took his life. And so whenever he released it, that was what gave it so much notoriety, was because it came out right at the time when Steve Jobs died, and it kind of gave this like really like in-depth view on who he was as a person. Those are the only two by Isaacson that I've read. He has one on Franklin that I want to read after I finish the Da Vinci one. But yeah, I love biographies because I just think that, like you said, it's really important to be able to see somebody who we consider a genius, and then like you can see them for all their pores and their imperfections. Because with Leonardo da Vinci, actually, he one of the funniest things I think about him, because obviously, we all think of him for the paintings that we know him for, but throughout his whole life, he was like really like he didn't finish things. Like he was
Yeah.
notorious for not finishing things. And I think seeing that somebody could be so influential in so many different fields of just everything. I mean, he was a scientist, an artist,
So
everything.
prolific while still
Yeah.
managing to not finish stuff. Yeah.
And he never finished anything. It was crazy. Like, I mean, really, the paintings that he was famous for are the paintings he finished. Like, everything else is just like it would sit in journals. But
He didn't even do that many paintings. Like it's not a big
yeah.
part of his his work that he left behind. I've heard some people say that looking back at his life and his writings and stuff, that it's very likely he had ADHD or something
Oh,
along,
definitely.
um,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I was diagnosed this year and finally got on medication for it, which has been really eye-opening. After spending 7 years on a project, which was took a lot of logistical effort.
That was when they figured it out. You told them that, and they were like, "Oh, we know exactly."
Because it's you just get used to the way you function, and so kind of like learning a little bit about it and reading about some historical people who may have had it, like Mozart possibly,
Hmm.
and then you kind of see how that may, we can only speculate, but we do have a lot of records to look at, and it's like it just based on how he pushed in so many different directions, it kind of makes a lot of sense. And so it's kind of given me some comfort to see how it's so easy to be aware of like the drawbacks of functioning a certain way like that. So people like that make you realize, well, if you didn't have those impulses and that wiring, maybe, it can be hard to finish things, but maybe I wouldn't have been crazy enough to sit down and make the thing in the first place.
Yeah.
You get so deeply focused and interested in things, and you just like sink your teeth into it and can't let go, until you
Yeah.
lose. But that never happened.
Yeah, and I mean that's why Da Vinci was so great at what he did artistically, was because of all of his interests in science and nature and all this stuff. I mean, because compared to his contemporaries, people, I mean, the way that you can tell a Da Vinci from anything else, even in the pieces that you can see he didn't put quite as much effort into as his other ones, is just like the backgrounds speak for themselves. Like if you remove the character from the painting that he did, like the one that I think is the one that I'm thinking of, it's called The Virgin on the Rocks, and he did two different versions of it. And in the background, it's just this like fantastic representation of kind of this like very Edenic kind of world where there's like this rock face that kind of goes like this, and then in the background there's this like waterfall that, and everything is just perfectly represented, and even down to the fact of like the specific rocks that he was drawing, like at the top of the rock face compared to the sides, are only rocks that appear at that part of a rock face because of what it takes for that to. And so he would have
Wow.
had to have, I mean, he didn't have Google, so he would have had to have been walking around and either see something like that and be able to recognize it to such a in like an infinitesimal degree to replicate it, or he was just studying literally every like layer of rock just to make sure that he was getting something that was so true to life.
That's something I really mourn. As amazing as all this technology is, like obviously we're talking across the country
Mhm.
and I can reach people through Instagram and I have a digital camera to easily capture a film when I'm doing animation. It's great. But being inundated with all this stuff, it's like you really have to deliberately carve out time and the intention to go and experience the world like that.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't. Back then, it probably would have been a lot more natural to just get up and go for a walk and take your sketchbook. Because
Mhm.
what else are you gonna do? But um, I find that's something it takes a ton of discipline and a lot of planning to kind of like carve out of our
Mhm.
schedules. It's like we have all this stuff to make our lives easier, but when you really want to get deep into a craft, you have to you have to make a huge effort to give yourself
Mhm.
the space, the mental clarity and space to slow down and see the world like that, and like really look at like how the bark is shaped on the tree, and it's just something we blaze by in the way our world works these days.
Yeah.
So it's that's another great thing about biographies is going back and like seeing somebody who was so good at what they did. It they had a whole different context for what
Mhm.
they were doing in their life in terms of what they were being exposed to and what they were being influenced by and what their day was structured like. So it's always a good reminder because we get so used to how things are in the modern world, and you think, oh, it's just how it is, and we got screens, and we're by breakfast we're inundated with more more images in an hour than most people probably saw in their whole lifetime,
Yeah.
100 years ago. So it's good to have a reminder. I think, especially as a creative person, you kind of have to have a bit of a monastic kind of mindset sometimes, and it's good to keep in touch with the old masters and realize, if you really want to get good at something, you have to cut things out of your life. You have to sacrifice. You can't just be entertained all the time because it's polluting your creative channels.
Yeah. Well, that actually, funnily enough, like perfectly leads into something that I was interested in talking with you about. So obviously with working on animal math for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so for working on that for 7 years, and having to dedicate so much time, being the sole person creating and doing everything in it, what were your days and like your weeks looking like? Like how did you, I don't know what you were doing outside of creating that, but like how were you kind of, I don't know a better way to put this other than like something kind of really um like out there, but kind of like how are you allowing the the time that you needed to put into animal math to kind of alchemize through the rest of your day? Like what
No,
were you?
that definitely makes sense to me. I mean, I have a lot of that's a good word, alchemize. Like I'm very interested in that kind of
Mhm.
philosophy, and I have some hermetic stuff hanging around as a reminder. Because like what we were just talking about, when you're just dumping stuff from just random stuff from the internet into your head, and you're like, garbage in, garbage out. What you
Mhm.
are absorbing um, comes out in your personality and your work. And so, I'm as addicted to all this stuff as anybody. But I try to be conscious of it, and I try to limit it. And it's hard as an artist because you have to engage with social media to
Mhm.
so people are aware of you. But I try to limit it. So when I was working on the film, I'd say a typical day, I would get up um, relatively early and um, make some tea and sit and read for a little bit, or like go through my sketchbooks and try to just kind of I used to be able to just sit up and draw but now I'm about to turn 36. Like I have to I have to kind of gear up for the day. So like make something to eat, make some tea, sit and look at some art books or read, go through my storyboards, just kind of like steep myself in my inspirations and like
Mhm.
what about to work on, and it's weird looking back. A lot of it is kind of a blur, but um, at kind of peak production, I would easily spend 10 hours a day working on it. I was lucky to get some grant money
Mhm.
and have some fan support. And let's see, we moved back here right before COVID hit, and my wife and I built our little house with my dad. And so I worked on some big commissions through quarantine
Mhm.
that paid for like all the materials to build and stuff. And so then a lot of times during the day I would work on the house with my dad, and because we were saving so much money by like me providing labor, that was kind of like the best paying job I've ever had. When you look at what it costs to buy or rent, being able to build that was valuable enough that I was able to then spend the rest of my time working on the film. So like people ask me like, how did you fund this? It's like it's kind of a unique situation. I also had some serious health issues, and I was on disability for a short period of time, and would
Mm.
like maybe get a couple hours done a day if I was lucky. But I was also unable to work on it for some stretches of time because I was just so sick. I couldn't. I had no energy. I couldn't sit up. So it's kind of weird. There's times when I would hardly get out of bed for a couple weeks, and then there's other times when I wasn't sleeping much and I was staying up late and just grinding
Mhm.
it out. So, um, over the course of so many years, my life has kind of taken a few different arcs. But so yeah, there's times when just trying to squeeze in whatever I could. You have to attend to other things, and so I would be lucky maybe if I could get in 30 minutes here or something like that. But for a few years at least, I was able to focus on it like a full-time job basically. So um, yeah, I took Instagram off my phone for a while until I was ready to start actually animating the film, and because
Mhm.
I knew once I started assembling everything, then I'd have interesting, I hate the word, but interesting content to post. So I just took it off my phone and tried to just completely steep myself in music and
Mhm.
art and poetry, and really get deep into this zone where I could create something that hopefully transcended its parts. Because you're just working with flattened wood pulp and putting pigment onto it, and that's something that really interests me about alchemy. It's like you're taking these very base materials,
Mhm.
and then you are capturing light and assembling, frame by frame, every movement of the puppets, because I'm animating with stop motion by hand.
Mhm.
It literally there is blood and sweat and spit and cat hair and all that stuff goes, and sometimes you can see my shadow flickering on the edges of the frame. And so even though you're just dealing with pieces of paper, and some keyboard tracks, some sound waves, the idea that you can it's hard sometimes talking about art because you get into woo woo territory, and it
Oh, I
sounds
know exactly what you
sounds
mean.
so
Yeah.
sounds so precious. But when you're an artist, you live in this world, you have to try to find language to express it. So the idea that you can take these base materials and hopefully, if you do your job and if people are open to it, you can basically like create a portal into your mind and your emotional
Mhm.
experience that other people can then they won't have the exact experience that I am trying to translate, but they will then filter it into their own consciousness. And that kind of blows my mind when you really think about it. I think we take, because we're just so we're just smothered with content and images and sound all the time, that we take it for granted, and so much of it is crap. And it's not a crime to take it for granted, but when people really invest something, I think we forget what's actually happening. It's like a
Yeah.
metaphysical process where people are um opening up another dimension. So now the people who were able to see my film in Austin, it now kind of occupies this psychic territory where we can all go, we can go there in our memories, or you can rewatch it, or it's has its own atmosphere and its own life. And I think that's another reason I like working with physical materials and actually drawing everything by hand is like all this stuff exists in a stack of cardboard boxes up on my shelf, and knowing that people they're not just, I mean, ultimately it comes down to a DCP file or a .mov file or something like that. So it does have to be digitized, but they're my laptop's sitting on my animation table right now. So like when people watch it, they're seeing my my desk. It's not a virtual workspace. They're seeing artwork on my desk where I sat for hours and hours and hours and hours, and that's being brought to life and kind of transmitted into their heads. And um, I think, especially as we move into this new era where things are just kind of created without a lot of thought or effort put into it, or no effort,
Yeah.
I I think it's important. I think it's something that needs to be preserved, and we need to remember, why do we create things? Is it to just feed the content machine, or is it or is it like a way of living your life, and is it a way of communicating with other people? And just based on the people that kind of came out of the woodwork to come to this screening at Fantastic Fest, the people who are drawn to this kind of thing, and the other filmmakers that I was able to meet, it's really beautiful. The people who like want to go see handmade stuff, it's like a really cool demographic of people, and then the other filmmakers in my block are already like close friends, and um, I don't think you're going to achieve that by just like generating
Yeah.
artificially, because this is, this is something I have in common with these other people, is that we're like choosing to live our lives in this way where we can't help but um, kind of transmogrify all of our experience and emotions through animation, or whatever the art form is, and that's a very specific type of person, and
Yeah.
it's definitely the kind of person that I want to spend my time with.
Yeah, and I think that raises a really interesting point that I really haven't thought of before, because like with the whole this, thing of AI right now, that I mean, hopefully in some ways it seems like it's losing steam, in other ways it seems like it won't lose steam. It's like this really strange kind of liminal time. But I think
So,
that yeah, but I think that just the term like AI, meaning artificial intelligence, I mean, that kind of demands an understanding that like in some way, artificial intelligence is sitting somewhat on the same level as regular intelligence, not in the way that maybe they're both, because I don't think they're both equally as valuable. I think that real, like what comes from humans is so much more, I mean, just infinitely more beautiful than what comes from anything that I've ever seen a computer generate from a prompt.
yeah.
But when you made the point about how it seems like now, like everything, like does content exist now to just be content, or does it exist to be does it oh, your wording was does content exist to feed
Feed the machine.
yeah, feed the machine? Does it exist to feed the machine, or like does it exist to feed the soul? And I feel like at one level it kind of we've entered this time where even if it doesn't exist to feed both, it sort of does now exist to feed both. And that's put us in this interesting position where I think a lot of people are starting to realize it, which is kind of refreshing actually to see that even after only like what, like 2 or 3 years that ChatGPT has been a thing, that people are already kind of sick of it.
Well, then
Um,
out, man. It's we get it. It's like
yeah.
I think a lot of artists, at first seeing AI stuff in our feeds, you're like, oh, what the hell? It can do that, and then
Mm.
like, oh, but it can't get hands right, and then it gets hands right, and then we keep trying to tell ourselves, oh, well, it can't like really mimic like oil painting, and then so we're at the point where it's like, okay, we get it. It can do anything. It can
Yeah.
mimic anything. So what really matters? It's getting us to take a long, hard look at like why do we do
Yeah.
things? Um, and ultimately, it's about communication. So do you want to? you know, it's a complex conversation to have, but to me, it's also really, it comes down to something really simple. It's like context is everything, and it just shows you that like even if it can mimic exactly more or less how
Yeah.
something looks, it doesn't feel right. And
Hmm.
so that's really proved to me that no matter how close it gets to mimicking the look of something, how something feels in the end is the only thing that really matters.
Hmm.
So like I've gotten really good, like I can instantly spot, even if it's mimicking, at first we were seeing a lot of real glossy, weird CGI looking stuff. It was just very clearly AI, and it's like one particular style. But now, people use it to make line drawing, comics and all kinds of things. And I can spot it in a tiny thumbnail in a fraction of a second, because you can smell it. And
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say. But to me, that's what it boils down to. It's like I don't care how close you can get to aping the look of live action or stop motion or any other technique. I'm gonna feel it, and it's gonna feel great to watch. And I don't really care. I want to see what I think, as somebody who enjoys film and art, a big part of it is admiring what it took to make it. I love
Yeah.
watching, like, oh my god, look what just looking at the sets and be like, look, somebody built that. And watching special features as a kid, when that was kind of a new thing when I was in middle school, like when Lord of the Rings came out on DVD. It was kind of a novel thing to have the special features that showed how they made this stuff, and it really fostered an intense appreciation, and that's become a big part of my enjoyment of
Hmm.
film, is like knowing that people, they had two guys in a tent doing nothing but putting chain link together for armor for
Oh
like
my
2 or
God, I
3
love the behind the
years.
scenes of
you
Lord of the Rings.
know And so
That's
now
enough.
when I watch it, I look at all the armor. It's like, oh my god,
Yeah.
those chainmail guys.
That man, that completely just brought me back to my childhood there. That was another thing. So there was the Steve Jobs biography, and then there was the behind the scenes of the Lord of the Rings. Like I ate up the behind the scenes. I watched those so many times, and I think that also, I mean, in that kind of bringing back to what we were talking about, like that also just fed so much into the way that I think about like creativity and why we create things. I mean, because like the fact that somebody got paid and was doing that for like a year, just creating like 10,000 chain link pieces of chain link armor, it's just fascinating because I mean, even for the limited amount of time that you see that, it just brings that movie to life to so much or life so much. I don't know.
No, I
Um,
gotcha. Yeah,
yeah,
it brings up some interesting questions about like, where do you draw the line? Like, okay, so AI can step in and do this, so you don't have to anymore. It's like
yeah,
there's certain there's certain tasks that seem acceptable to kind of, okay, well, that's great. I don't have to worry about that anymore. As a creative person, it's like, oh, that would be great if I didn't have to worry about
hmm,
this or that. But then it's like, well, where do you draw the line? Like, do we really want it to get to the point where it has, where you just like, there's no technique or craft or frustration involved at all? You're just like, oh, this is my idea, boom, here it is.
yeah,
I think having to go through the frustration and the effort of bringing something to life, facing that, and having to go through that process is an incredible screener
hmm,
for the worth of an idea. Like, of course, people put a lot of effort in and spend millions of dollars on crappy movies and stuff, but still, they're the fact that you have to put in money, you have to put in time, you have to put in effort, all these things. It really gets you to look at the initial idea and be like, is this worthwhile? Like, how much do
yeah,
I can't speak for how good or bad my short film is, but that's up for other people to decide. It's just, it's too close to me. But I know at least that over 7 years, I was still compelled
hmm,
to get up and immerse myself in this little world. And in the end, I only have 15 minutes to show for it, but it's so dense with
yeah,
my like creative DNA. It's completely saturated with every moment I was sitting at my desk, and the care that I put into drawing little scales and tree bark and
hmm,
stones and blades of grass, and it all comes across. And I think you can feel that in something like I mean, like a Miyazaki movie, you know, you
Yeah.
just there's such a like a generosity of spirit when you watch those films. It is absolutely overflowing with meticulous care and
Hmm.
attention to detail. And I think ultimately it's like the ideas, the premise, and the writing, everything behind the movies is so solid. But ultimately, I think what makes them live so strongly and enduringly in people's hearts is you watch, and even if you don't know anything about animation, you can feel this outpouring of love and energy that the animators put into it, and that exacting vision that Miyazaki has. And it, yes, you're right. This is a weird liminal time that we're living in, but it was really gratifying going to Fantastic Fest and seeing, you know, when you're alone with your phone as an artist, I think it's easy to get overwhelmed and be like, oh, it's all,
Hmm.
people don't care, it's all over, it's just everything I've spent my whole life working towards is obsolete. But you realize like people really there's definitely a lot of people out there who don't care if something is AI generated. They're all about it. They're on the train, and it's fine. But I've been really encouraged to see the amount of people who have the as much as I hate the algorithm sometimes, it's drawn people
Yeah.
to me through Instagram and stuff who have an appreciation for this kind of thing. And I really thought when I was working on this that it would mostly be people kind of a similar age to me who were
Mhm.
nostalgic for I didn't do this project out of like a sense of nostalgia, but like I really just like working by hand. It's not a
Mhm.
it's not a nostalgic thing, but I figured it would be a lot of people who were kind of nostalgic for hand-drawn cartoons from the 80s and stuff. But I've been really gratified to see how many younger art students, like teenagers and stuff, write
Yeah.
me. And it's not nostalgia for them. It's like something from prehistory as far as they're concerned. And so the fact that I would actually take the trouble to make something by hand and cut these things out with a knife and assemble them on a sheet of glass, it seems to some of these younger people, it seems to kind of blow their mind, which is really funny to me because it's just how I work. Um, but these are people who, you know, I grew up with VHS tapes, and I didn't have any internet until I was a teenager, and yeah, I'm a you know that's a certain point of generationally as a millennial, right in that weird spot where like smartphones came about in my 20s, and so
Hmm.
my life is kind of cleanly divided into two halves technologically. um,
Man, I
so these
wish.
kids who are growing up with iPads and the internet and take all this stuff for granted, and CGI and everything, it's really cool to see how they're responding to this kind of work. They don't, in my experience, they don't seem to see it as something that's obsolete or antiquated. They're really interested in it because people want to make stuff. We want to use our
Yeah.
hands. Being on a screen all day doesn't really feel good.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, I think that that really is a great point. Because I think the difference, kind of what I was talking about earlier with regular, like what we are and what we create compared to like what it is that we're getting through algorithms and AI and all that, is that AI and algorithms are all very consumptive in everything that they do. And I think what human art does is it's very offering, it's very giving. And I think, I mean, because like, you were talking about this earlier with like the fact that now somebody technically could create something like animal math, like just by typing in basically like a script of what you did, and something would come out that probably would be a little bit similar to what you did. But there's something different about typing in something into a prompt and having all these random nodes in the matrix of ideas that AI works off of. There's something completely different about that creating something than the love and the time that it took. I mean, for you to sit down for 7 years straight and create something. And I think that that's what it is that people really, no matter, how like obsolete or whatever it gets, is what like I think people are really longing for. And even like kids who, I mean, really all that they've known. I mean, I'm 20, so I can't speak too much to it because I mean I was part of like I think the final wave of like I had a couple years without like serious algorithms and internet stuff. But I mean, like kids now who they're growing up like watching YouTube and all the YouTube is just all this CGI and all this AI generated stuff. You show them something like, you know, what you create or like an old cartoon from the 70s or the 80s. And I feel like that's what they're are actually drawn to because that speaks to the difference between how consuming the things that AI creates are because all that machines want, all that algorithms want is just more people to view it.
Yeah.
Whereas with what you're
Cynical way,
creating, yeah,
cynical way of thinking about art. It's like in terms of clicks or views or whatever. It's like I'd rather a much smaller group of people
yeah,
be my audience and have them be fully engaged and open themselves up to it emotionally than you know, millions of people who are just like watching it on their phone while they have the TV
yeah,
on the background or something. It's about intention
yeah.
and engagement.
And I mean,
Um,
to that, like your YouTube channel has something like, I think, what, 2.6 thousand subscribers. Like, and on YouTube, that seems really small on YouTube. But if you think about that in terms of like real life, 2,500 people is a lot of people.
yeah.
Like, that's more
Also
people
haven't put
than
a video out in 8 years.
yeah. And I mean that's more people than any of us could ever even hope to like know personally in our lives. And so
Yeah.
like the way that I think about it, well, actually not the way that I think about it and the way that I should be thinking about it, just because I think I've started to get so inundated by the idea of like algorithms as this kind of like capitalistic way of dragging people's attention out of them is like why yeah, like you said, why would you want to entertain well, like why would you want to entertain in quotes like 2 million people if a few thousand people are gonna like really be affected and really love the things that you do. I mean, because 2,000 people is like, that's a small amphitheater. That's like a small sports stadium or a small
Yeah, it's hard to
anything.
visualize. And
Like it's, yeah,
yeah, and I, you know, I've got um something like a 250,000 people on Instagram, you know, getting close to it, but it's like how many of those people
yeah,
are really invested. So and sometimes you realize that when you're like trying to
Mhm.
promote something and you you know, you get like 1% of your following to actually, you know, respond to it. So it's kind of a losing battle to focus on that too deeply because that's not the end goal. Like obviously, you know, artists, we want, you want to reach people, you want the reason, you know, you make it for yourself in a way, but like you make it also to communicate how you see the world to other people and
yeah,
hope that they will resonate with it emotionally or spiritually or however you want to say it. But um and you know, you want to make a living doing it, but I have come to terms with the idea that like if it came to it, I would go mop floors or work at a cat shelter or something and just like do art of my own. It's not worth um ruining like the purity of intention of what you do to try and hold on to likes and
yeah,
followers and stuff, because ultimately it's like, well, you know, you could do you could get all the followers just, you know, by just doing something totally stupid. I mean, most of the people who have like the biggest followings, that they're what they're offering is not really of any substance
yeah,
or meaning. So if that's what you want to gauge success by, I think you're already you're fighting a losing battle. So it's good to remember that ultimately it's worthwhile if you can connect with just even one person. Hopefully you can connect with more people, but you know, in the aftermath of the premiere in Austin, getting to actually speak with people,
mhm,
like at the closing night party, some people came up to me who were in the audience and told me like the experience that they had. And one person told me that they had tears in their eyes and they couldn't explain why. It's not like
mhm.
a, you know, this is not like a finely crafted Pixar narrative that's a tearjerker. It's just it's something more, you know, it's like more poetic and intuitive. It kind of flows. It's a very dreamlike narrative. So it's not. So it's cool to hear that people, even though there wasn't like a tangible story that was making them cry, there was something that was evoking that emotion in them, and just hearing that from a handful of people, it was, it sounds crazy. I definitely wouldn't, it would be hard to stare down the barrel of 7 years ahead of you, being like, oh, I'm going to do all this just to make a couple people, enjoy themselves for 15 minutes. But like getting to the end and hearing that feedback, it does make it feel all worthwhile. It's like, wow, okay, so these people opened themselves up and they took this into their consciousness and now it's theirs too. And it really is worthwhile. It's even if you have to stay up and do it after a day job that you hate, it's like art is worthwhile. I think we're pinning too much on commodifying and quantifying, and I'm sure there's people who are gonna like you watch my film, it's over in 15 minutes, and they're like, okay, what's next? The next, you're
Yeah.
gonna put one of these out every week, and it's like, no, I tend to not be drawn towards series and stuff. I like standalone films because I find it kind of it does feel good to get lost in a series and you know that you got a ton of episodes ahead of you, but there's something about it that kind of is frustrating to me in a way because you're just always chasing the next thing. And a lot of my favorite work is this standalone film where it's self-contained. You watch it and it ends and that's it, but you can go back and instead of just wanting more and more and more, you can go back and revisit it. So like,
Hmm.
going back to Star Wars, I grown up, I had George Lucas's 6 movies that he made.
Hmm.
He had a complete arc. Um, and I was let's see, 9, 12, and 15 as the prequels came out. So I got to experience those in the theater, and it has a very satisfying end. And it's something that I go back every couple of years and I watch them all in order, and
Hmm.
that's great. It comes to an end, and I love them and I cherish them. And now this this world we live in where it's just people are just so hungry. It's like for me, it's not Star Wars. Like I'm interested in what George had to say,
Yeah.
and just because Disney bought the rights and they can legally put lightsabers and X-wings in it, to me, it's like okay, it has an X-wing in it. It's not Star Wars. Like I
Yeah.
don't care what you call it. It looks like Star Wars, but I don't crave like I don't get this impulse to be like I need more. What about this planet and what we needed to see this character's backstory. It's like growing up there used to be this I don't know if it was in any of the books or anything, but there's always like this rumor that like Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc. And I had some
Yeah.
kid tell me on the playground, like if you freeze your VHS tape at just the right point, you can actually see him flying out, which you can't. But I used to do that and I used to try and catch him and I used to imagine like, wow, like if he escaped the Sarlacc, then what happened? And it stimulates your imagination. Now we just want to see everything spelled out. And I don't know if you saw the book of Boba Fett, but like it's kind of my imagination was a lot more interesting than what they
Yeah.
came up with, and having that open-ended mystery is a lot more beautiful than having a corporation being like, well, this is what happened, and it's not very gratifying to me. So I uh I hope we will steer. I don't necessarily see it happening anytime soon. It's certainly not in the mainstream, but like I hope people will see that like now that we all these fandoms can be completely gratified with just endless streams of series and exploring every character and every timeline. It's like okay, we're stuffed, maybe we will, at least a lot of the people I know, and granted I know a lot of cynical artists, so it's not it's not a very it's not a demographic that's really indicative of the population at large. But I do see in certain circles, people are getting tired of that, and they want to see things that are a pure form of expression, things that are a little more ragged around the edges, that aren't.
Yeah.
It's like we are pumped full of perfectly polished, officially licensed stuff every day, every minute of the day, and so to me it's like punk rock to see, oh, somebody made this scrappy little animation. It's just line drawings. Like, I don't know if you know Don Hertzfeldt's work. Did a Such a Beautiful Day and Rejected, and he just does line drawing like stick figures, but
Yeah.
he'll rip your heart out. It's incredible, and I would generally rather see what somebody like that is up to than the most eye popping. I love a good CGI heavy blockbusters as much
Yeah.
as I love the MonsterVerse movies and stuff. I'm a sucker for certain things, but that doesn't have to be everything. You know, we can take in stuff from smaller voices, and it's good to see what people can make with limited resources, and because usually that's gonna it takes a lot of energy and passion to get those things through, and I think that really shines through in that kind of work. So again, I can't speak for my work, but like seeing some of the films that I was paired with in Fantastic Fest were similarly, the one that played before me was made by one person, and the one that played
Hmm.
after me was this um, stop motion heavy metal phantasmagoria that was made primarily by two people.
Hmm.
And seeing these fresh individual voices up on a big screen in a setting where it was curated and presented and given its due,
Hmm.
was incredible, because you don't in regular life get the opportunity to see stuff like that presented the way it really should be, rather than just watching on a laptop or something. Which that's fine too. I'm totally fine with people, watching my stuff on a phone or a laptop. But as long as you're like, sit down and give it a chance, like
Yeah.
give them the lights at least, and
Yeah.
try to open yourself up. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that that actually like really beautifully answers the final question that I would have asked. And I mean, unfortunately, too, looking at the time, it looks like I'm gonna have to be getting off here in a second. But yeah, I mean, that is really great. I mean, I never really thought about that before because it's kind of like you can look at those big purchases like, Disney buying Lucasfilm and Disney buying Pixar as kind of this like first wave of um, the impending generative art overtaking traditional art. I mean, because yeah, there really is something, I mean, absolutely magical to those first six Star Wars movies. And I remember that too because I mean, the nice thing about being born in, when I
Warner
was
Revenge of
in
the
there.
Sith came out.
Yeah. Actually, I was born the same year as Revenge of the Sith, so I was right at the end of it. And so being alive and being just a young kid for that like final phase of Star Wars being like just Lucasfilm, it's I had all those same kind of imaginations of like what does the world outside of the films look like the world, the universe, the galaxy outside of the camera. And then Disney comes along and they zoom out, and it's kind of like that first scene in Blazing Saddles where they zoom out and you see the music coming from the band, and you're like, oh man, really, is that where the music's coming from? I thought it was just kind of
Yeah.
echoing from the canyon.
Yep.
And it's just
That's a great way.
and it's just really sad because it's like, man, I miss whenever that's kind of one of the things I loved about being a kid in general was like you just I mean even back to like what we were talking about with Leonardo da Vinci, like he just didn't have all the same like sciences and math and all this that we have now, and all the artistic knowledge. I mean, because he pioneered a lot of that. And I mean, someone like him, someone like George Lucas, they used all this very limited amount of resources relative to what we have now and created something that I don't think could ever really be created again. I mean, in a cliche way, it's easy to say, but I don't think in a really real way that we could ever get another Mona Lisa, and I don't think that we could ever get another Star Wars. And I mean, we'll have things in the future where people 500 years after that will say, "Oh man, I can't believe this or that," and like we'll never have that again.
Right.
But, in one way or another, I think we might have jumped a shark where it's like now, it's kind of like being a cynical artist there. But
But
yeah.
I think I'm also a romantic. I think you can balance cynicism with romanticism, and it's possible for them to both coexist. And I think you need a healthy dose of cynicism. You shouldn't let it cloud
Oh,
the way you see
definitely. Yeah.
everything, because it's just you just get so bitter. And I'm not bitter, and I'm not a pessimist. I have a lot of hope. I think we're teetering on the edge here, but I have a lot of hope for the future.
Yeah.
Um, I have a baby boy, so I have to, I have to have
Yeah.
hope. I'm also again seeing how, like, okay, we've come so far in this one direction and we're already tired of it, like most of
Yeah.
us. It's making us depressed and anxious. So s- it's just like a law of physics, for every action, an equal and opposite reaction. And if you're into alchemy and hermeticism and stuff, there's the stage of putrefaction
Yeah.
right before all of the elements um, condense and turn into purified metaphorical gold. You have the stage of putrefaction, and it's when it seems like you totally messed it up and it's irrecoverable, and no good is going to come from it. And it's basically that is the necessary final stage before things clarify and transform into something transcendent. And
That's really beautiful. Yeah. I never thought about that before.
well, it's I think it might be coming. And
Yeah.
you know, and like you were saying with AI stuff, it's like kids were just subjected to that all the time, and they're being drawn towards these things that are handmade. It's like with that kind of alchemical mindset, um, what you are putting into it really does matter. So, like, are you just mindlessly scraping the internet for data to get something that looks a certain way, or as a human artist, yes, we're all drawing from influences, and you're inspired by things, and you might even steal from things. But I'm not just like, you know, so like what some of my favorite books, I love Maurice Sendak and like a lot of these
Yeah.
classic picture books that I grew up with, the Rainbow Goblins. I'm not just like scraping data off of Google Images from that. I'm going back and remembering like sitting in the backyard on a sunny afternoon when I was 5, and the way the book smelled and the way the pages felt, and getting lost in the texture of the cross hatching of those drawings, and so it's steeped in your own experience. And you can be a materialist reductionist about the stuff if you want. That's a valid way of seeing the world. But I used to think that way, but I've kind of come around, and I definitely see things in a more it's easy for people to laugh at the word, but like see things in a more metaphysical way. It's like as an artist, you are taking your personal experience and your emotional connection to these inspirations that you have, and you are filtering it out through how your brain is wired and how you see the world. And yeah, people try to pro AI, people try to say, oh well, artists just steal and it's the same thing, but it's I'm sorry, it's not. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not just
Definitely.
data. As a human being, like, you are processing data, but I think it's coming from an entirely different place, and I don't think I don't think that can be replaced.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's a really great place to end. Thank you like so much for coming on this. I would love to get you on again and talk further.
I'd love
Um,
to, Caleb. Thanks for
this has
letting
really been
me
a great
ramble.
time.
You did definitely
Oh,
hit
no problem.
hit on some subjects that get me
Yeah.
a little a
I'm always
little.
glad whenever I meet somebody who likes talking about the same stuff that I like talking about because it's hard to find, but I mean that's one good thing about the internet.
I
So,
hope I wasn't too long-winded,
oh no,
but
definitely not.
you had great questions and great topics, and it's a pleasure meeting you and talking to you. And yeah, but I'd love to come on again someday.
Thanks.
Well, maybe after you see the film.
Definitely, yeah. I'm so excited to see it, man. It looks great.